Hey guys, welcome to today's video. This is Martin from martinmixing.com, and today we will be looking at dynamic EQs and how they're different a little bit from multiband compressors and how I use them in the mix and how you can use them in your mixes as well. Let's do it. Okay, so before we jump into Logic, let's have a quick discussion about what dynamic EQ is. Essentially, it's the same as a multiband compressor. In most cases, it's an evolution from it in some ways. It's kind of like a compressor, a multiband compressor, and an EQ had a weird baby that is doing a lot of things for you in the mix. We know many examples of dynamic EQs. We have the Waves F6, which is a really good one, and I indeed have as well. I don't often use it because it's a bit overkill for me, to be honest, but I do use a lot the plugin alliance, the Brainworx Dynamic EQ, and that's the one I want to show you today. How it's different from a multiband compressor? Well, multiband compressors usually work on a wider range of frequency band. So you can't get a super narrow reduction of one particular frequency on a multiband compressor, and most of them at least. I use the FabFilter multiband a lot. The narrowest I can go there is still too wide often to handle certain tasks that I'm faced with. So I use multiband compressors to kind of gently massage an overall performance or a wider range of frequencies. And I use a dynamic EQ to manage really narrow problems, most often whistles and resonant frequencies in particular tracks. So let's jump right into Logic. I have a mix set up here, and I'm gonna stick to one example where I use dynamic EQ the most, which is the vocal, because the vocal 90% of the times has issues that can be fixed quite easily with the dynamic EQ. So what happens is that every voice, every instrument, every body, everything kind of has a resonant frequency, even our universe. And this resonant frequency often gets too audible and can distract from the essence of what is the vocal. Now, our voice boxes, which is our instrument that we have kind of here between our head, our mouth, and our throats, has a particular size, and this size usually correlates to a particular frequency in most cases. If it's kind of a normal human being, this is between 2.6 kilohertz and 3.5 kilohertz. If someone has a particularly high voice, it can be higher. If someone has a particularly low voice, it can be a bit lower. But in most cases, I listen out for these resonant frequencies, these whistles in this particular frequency range. Now, often we don't hear it. If you listen to podcasts, you will hear this very, very clearly, especially when people use SM7s, which have a particular kind of boost at around, well, at pretty much exactly 2.8 kilohertz. I've mixed enough SM7s to know where this problem is, and this tends to amplify this resonant frequency that most people have at exactly that point as well. So you get this double kind of amplification, which is really unpleasant. So if you mix SM7s, 2.8 has to go down really narrowly. Then guitar amplifiers, because of the 12-inch speakers and the whole way that guitars and amplifiers work together, they usually have this resonance around 3.1 kilohertz. I can nearly guarantee you that if you put a 3.1 kilohertz cut on your guitar, you will hear that the guitar has just become more pleasant to listen to, because that's where this kind of peak usually is. So let's jump into this vocal. When I play it back now, it will most likely sound good. It's well recorded, it's well pre-processed during recording, it's well pitch corrected, everything is good. So let's kind of start tweaking it to fit into this imaginary mix.
Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim. In the December glow, the shift and blink of light. Cold.
Okay, so already we can hear everything here seems good and nothing is very offensive to the ear. However, I can already tell that there will be a problem, and I'll show you exactly where, because I can hear it, because I know what to listen for, because I know what happens after EQ and compression, I know what will become a problem.
Cold. Little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim.
So you can hear that this whistle at 3200 Hertz is quite prominent already, even without the EQ, of course. I'm just emphasizing it so you can really hear it. But once we add EQ and compression, it will become even more dominant. Let's check out for another one.
Little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow. Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim.
So at 2.66 there is another one, so it's probably two different kind of characteristics of this voice. Maybe it's the voice and the microphone adding its own stamp to it. Most microphones also have a resonant frequency that can become quite unpleasant. SE microphones are, or were, I don't know if they fixed it, quite notorious for having a 5.1 kilohertz kind of resonant peak that I always have to EQ out when I receive those recordings. Even my voice is now corrected for this, because even my voice, of course, and this microphone has a problem, and I'm correcting it as I'm recording this in my post-production software. What happens now during mixing is, of course, we'll do a little bit of EQing. Let's just pull up a virtual mix rack. That is fine. Let's just put some mild EQ and, of course, an LA2A on it.
Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow. The shift and blink of light. Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow. The shift and blink of light. Cold.
Cool, so this is a really cool rough mix of this vocal, let's say. One compression trick I can give you is make sure that the compressor, as it works, recovers as much as possible to 0, because everything, if it doesn't, then everything beyond that is basically just making it quieter. So of course the release on this particular compressor is really, really slow, between 1 and 0 dB, so it's okay if it stays there, but usually on faster compressors it's good for the compression to always recover to 0, otherwise there's no point in doing it. So now, as we have compressed and EQ'd this vocal a little bit, we can hear that this problem has become a bit more present. And I could go, if I wanted to, and I could just take this EQ and reduce this nasty resonance.
Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow. The shift and blink of light. Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow.
So this works, and this is kind of a good rough way of doing it, I would say. However, this problem, as we can hear, doesn't happen at every part of this vocal, so you don't want to treat the whole performance the same way, because sometimes in some sections we might want this little bit of 3 and 4K in the vocal, and we don't want to destroy the whole thing. So this is where dynamic EQs come in really handy, and I'm going to use the BX version just because I'm the most familiar with that one. And as you can see, this has the same settings as most compressors do. It has an attack, a release. I usually don't touch these because I want it to start acting really, really fast. The second or the millisecond really this problem appears. And I want it to kind of release in a somewhat gentle manner. So everywhere between 20 and 50 milliseconds works. I usually just keep it where it is at 50, it works perfectly. There's, it's still super fast. I mean, 50 milliseconds is really, really fast. And then here we have this section, which is where the money is really. We have a factor, which is essentially your ratio. So for every dB that goes above the threshold, a factor of 1 will be reduced as well. So if I put it on 2, of course, then for 1 dB that it goes above the threshold, 2 decibels will be reduced. I use it on 1, that works perfectly, and we can set a maximum reduction, which I usually keep between 6 and 8. And then here's where the magic happens as well. We have a key input, which is what frequency will trigger my reduction. And we have the actual dynamic EQ, which has different bands. You can unlink them. I'm just going to keep it linked for now. And of course, you want a really narrow reduction. So I'm going to use this one here that seems narrow enough. And we can, of course, change the frequency where this should be working. So let's just copy over the frequency of the first one, which is 278. Let's type that in here. 2780, boom. And now, so instead of reducing this frequency altogether, we'll set the threshold so that it only reduces the frequency when the problem appears.
Cold little hands, heavy eyelids, drooping slowly dim in the December glow.
This is a perfect example. You can hear that on the E, December. That's where it works most, and that's indeed where this resonance comes up the most.
In the December.
So this is number 1 sorted. It's quick. I mean, why would you want to spend more time on it? So we do another copy of this, which is then exactly 4000.
In the December glow. In the December glow, the shift and blink of lights, yellow, blue, red like months in sequence, always right in their place.
Let's check this last phrase here because it seems to have this problem. So we set it up really quickly. As you can see, there's really nothing much to it. We don't have to overthink it. You have to find the problematic frequency. The good thing is you can also solo this here. This is really helpful because you can find the problematic frequency without having to boost the living hell out of it and destroying your eardrums and speakers in the process.
In their place, in their rhythm.
So this should be a 1-2 minute thing. Now let's have a check before and after.
In their place.
In their place. So you can really hear this whistle in both the in and the place.
In their place.
Now let's check with.
In their place.
Much better, but still not completely there.
In their place. In their place.
It was a bit higher, so it's always worth double checking and fine tuning if necessary.
In their place.
I think on this one we can be a slight bit more aggressive as well. Let's do 8.
In their place. In their place.
Oh, beautiful. Look at that. Before and after.
In their place. In their place.
Much better. So when using these kind of processors, you don't want to go too extreme because when you listen in solo, every frequency becomes a problem. If you boost 16 dB of a particular frequency, of course it will sound unpleasant, and the temptation is there to just reduce everything. Another tendency is that once you reduce, let's say 4200 Hertz, that a neighboring frequency will seem a bit too dominant. Again, we have to be a bit disciplined here and not just start reducing, because in the end you'll have nothing left of your original vocal. So I really encourage everyone to be really disciplined, just listen to the vocal. I don't like using these tools, okay? I want to deliver a good sounding song. I don't want to deliver something that has been over-engineered just for the sake of engineering, okay? Our job as mixers is to deliver good sounding songs and not over-processed mixes. That's not our job, so I want to mix everything with the least amount of processing, with the least amount of plugins possible. Of course, sometimes you have to do a bit more, but other times you can do very little. As a last note, let's do a quick comparison between a dynamic EQ and the FabFilter Multiband, which is everyone's most favorite multiband compressor for good reason. So as you can see, even if I wanted to do a really narrow reduction, I couldn't do it because even at its narrowest setting, it seems quite wide. So I really just want to be able to take out that one particular whistle that was in the voice, and this would still kind of affect too much. But let's try to set this to the same frequency, 4200-ish, and let's see what we can achieve with this one.
In their place, in their rhythm, please don't stop it. In their place.
So as you can see, it's much wider. It's affecting a bit too much right away. So a multiband compressor I would use to manage the vocal as a whole. For instance, in this one, you might want to massage a little bit more of the mid-range because it's a little bit boxy.
In their place, in their rhythm, please don't stop it. In their place, in their rhythm, please don't stop it.
And you can get, of course, a really cool low end fullness by compressing it and just keeping it steady.
In their place, in their rhythm, please don't stop it.
But of course, the original problem remains that the whistles are there. So we do need these dynamic EQs, these really narrow notches to treat this particular problem.
In their place, in their rhythm.
I hope this translates well after MP3 compression that my screen grab software unfortunately does. I hope you can hear all the whistles. I hope you can hear the subtle adjustments, especially of the dynamic EQ. But I hope this demonstration makes clear the difference between dynamic EQ and multiband compressor. The two tools are quite similar, but I would say that dynamic EQs are a bit more developed and a bit more surgical compared to most multiband compressors out there. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope this has demonstrated quite well the difference between multiband compressor and dynamic EQ, and this one particular way in how you can use a dynamic EQ, and the only way really how I use it. Now, of course, this is just a band selective compressor, so you can set it up as a de-esser. You can use it as an expander on your kick to make it more boomy on every hit. You can set the sidechain frequency, so the triggering frequency, to a different one that's actually being treated. So you can, for instance, have a harsh sibilant boost the low end if you want. You just set it up in a different way, but that would be a bit beyond the scope of this video. I might do a more in-depth one in the future. Hope this is helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It really helps. If you're watching this in my Facebook group, great to have you. And of course, I welcome everyone in this community to help and support each other in our mixing adventures. And I'll be seeing you in the next video. Until then, happy mixing. Take it easy. Bye-bye.